Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Congress has a full plate before lawmakers leave town for August. The problem isn't a lack of important work, it's that competing priorities from the House, Senate, and White House are all jockeying for the same limited attention and political capital. For a look at where those tensions stand, I'm joined now by Mitchell Miller, Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Mitchell, so great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
Both chambers are back in town this week, but there's only 8 legislative workdays before they leave again for their 5-week recess in August. It seems like there's an awful lot on their plate, but not a lot of time here. What are you watching as the top important things they've got to get done over the next couple of weeks?
The biggest thing I'm watching is the series of defense and military spending pieces of legislation that are kind of stuck right now, and especially the National Defense Authorization Act. I mean, you would think the NDAA at this point would have moved forward more than it has, but of course, right before they left, the House had that whole car crash, if you will, politically related to the NDAA and the SAVE Act, the legislation that would require a national voter ID, and the effort by House Speaker Mike Johnson to merge those didn't go over well with the conservative wing of the party. So it's kind of surprising that the NDAA is stuck in suspended animation right now. And then you also have the $67 billion that the Pentagon wants in the supplemental for Iran. And given all the different things that are happening in connection with Iran, there's really a lot of nervousness and concern among lawmakers about what's going to happen with all this military spending, even though they have moved forward on the bulk of the Pentagon and White House request for over $1 trillion in defense spending. There's all these different tangents related to it, including the reconciliation bill, which is $350 billion. It just doesn't seem like all of them are coming together as they need to be, at least right now. And as you point out, with only 8 legislative days, how do you sort all this out and get it done before they go off on summer recess?
Are you seeing any move from the White House or the Pentagon to try to explain the current situation, to try to move lawmakers forward?
There have been efforts on that front. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was up here on the Hill before they took break, kind of quietly meeting with lawmakers behind the scenes, especially on the Senate side in connection with what they are going to do moving forward. And I do think that they are going to, if the lawmakers get the answers that they want from the administration, I think some of these things can move. But there's still a lot of skepticism, even among Republicans who support the president, about whether or not this money is going to get approved, because they really just don't know what's happening with Iran. And that's just a big question mark right now.
Well, and a big piece, as you said, of the Pentagon's proposed budget for 2027 sits in Reconciliation 3.0. And we've talked about that many, many times, but we've also just kind of talked about it as a big bucket of things. What else is in there that folks really have a vested interest in trying to move forward?
Well, part of it, of course, are many pieces of military equipment that they want to get through. You have $16 billion for things like the Air Force and new F-35s. You have the fact that there needs to be ramping up of munitions in connection with the war with Iran that some are concerned have dropped to a level that's too low. The Space Force is asking for $12 billion in reconciliation funds. So those are all the military parts of it. And then there are all these domestic things that there's talking about, but they haven't really actually got them physically in the legislation. On the House side, there's consistently talk about getting affordability measures put in there. Of course, the SAVE Act that I just mentioned, there's talk about somehow getting new grants that would go to states so that they could do more to verify the IDs of people when they vote. There's a whole smorgasbord of things that the House lawmakers in particular want to put in there. But on the Senate side, there's a lot of skepticism about whether or not Reconciliation 3.0 is even going to happen. Senators are skeptical that the House is, first of all, going to come through and get this approved. And then, as we heard over a month ago from Senator Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins, the Republican appropriations chief, they both are skeptical that 3.0 will actually move forward. And then on top of that, you have the complication of Senator McConnell himself, who, of course, has been in the hospital since mid-June. And people are worried about whether that will kind of slow things down in terms of the fact that he heads up the subcommittee that essentially moves forward on Pentagon money. So, again, a lot of question marks right now as we head into this week.
Mitchell Miller is Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Mitchell, I'm hearing that some of the challenges with Reconciliation 3.0 might also be because folks out on the campaign trail are having trouble talking about Reconciliation 1.0, the one big, beautiful bill. What are you hearing there?
Right. I mean, there was supposed to be a very symbolic piece of legislation passed by the House before they went on break that essentially said, hey, look what we did a year ago. We pushed it through and we got the big, beautiful bill done. And since then, they've of course, renamed the legislation and say it's mainly more about working families and tax cuts. But they have had a very difficult time, Republicans, in selling the public on exactly what is in this massive bill. And as you and I have talked about before, part of the problems, and whether it's for Republicans or Democrats, when they get one of these huge bills through Congress, there are so many disparate things in connection with it that they have a hard time kind of giving a basic bullet point to the constituents. What does this mean for me? Now, Republicans have stressed the fact that people's taxes would have gone up had this not been passed. But other than that, they've really not had a lot of luck selling this. And of course, there was a lot of talk about President Trump going out on the campaign trail essentially and selling parts of affordability and issues related to how this is making people's lives better. But they've really had a difficult time getting their messaging across.
This seems like it poses some real challenges for the basic legislative agenda. And of course, one of the things we're always concerned about here is the appropriations bills. Are any of those moving underneath all of this turbulence?
Very, very slowly, kind of like a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. You have the House, again, was supposed to pass a State Department appropriations piece that usually would be able to get through fairly smoothly, but because everything froze in the House when they had this back and forth over the NDAA and the SAVE Act, that is stuck right now. And then on the positive side, you do have the fact that the House Appropriations Committee has actually approved all of the appropriations bills out of that panel. But on the negative side, the Senate has not considered any of the dozen appropriations bills for the upcoming year. And part of that, again, is because of the bitterness related to reconciliation. Like even, as I mentioned, Susan Collins, somebody who's right in the thick of things with appropriations, is really kind of disappointed with the fact that she thinks it's undermining the overall appropriations process. And so everything is getting stuck. And then, as we've talked about, we're getting into the campaign season, and the fact that they haven't gotten to any of the Senate appropriations bills right now, that's pretty concerning.
Well, there was a little tidbit of news on Friday that maybe gives us a flavor of how the legislative approach is going to work going forward. Both chambers finally passed the big housing bill a few weeks ago, and it got enacted in a very unusual way on Friday. What's your take on that?
My take is I have never seen anything quite like that. When you have a bipartisan bill that lawmakers from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both touted, and they were all set, of course, to sign it and have the president sign it here at the Capitol, and it didn't get signed. So then what happens is they wait for 10 days, and the president on Friday says, nope, not going to sign it. I am going to let it go. And that is because he is so upset that they have not done anything on national voter ID. So you have the very, very unusual situation of having a piece of bipartisan legislation passed by Congress, not signed by the president, not vetoed by the president, but because he didn't sign it, it passes and it now is law.
So look into your crystal ball for me and tell me what impact you think that has on the motivation to push really challenging legislation forward going, in the future.
I think that is a really, really troubling sign, because there's no doubt that the president is going to continue to put pressure on the Republican Party in the House and the Senate to try to get something related to the SAVE Act passed. And that is just really gumming up the works in connection with legislative process. The House, as I mentioned, they essentially were frozen and not able to move ahead with anything because of this the differences of opinion related to the SAVE Act. And then moving forward in the Senate, it's even more of a problem because some Republicans have also said that they're not going to go along with it. So it does not foreshadow really good things in connection with the appropriations process when you have the president refusing to sign something that Congress has passed.
That's Mitchell Miller, Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Mitchell, I really appreciate your insights here, as always.
You bet.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.